through the rest of today.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. Hey, look, again, just want to echo thank you so much to Helen and Shaun this morning. I'm just going to keep my intro extremely brief, but we're really going to talk about the Great Resignation in two parts. Really, the first being what's going on and why, and what are the underlying root causes of the Great Resignation. And then finally, what can we do about it, both strategically and tactically? We're going to treat this as much as possible as a real life panel. So I'll be keeping an eye on the chat thread, or please just use the hands up feature if you're not familiar with Zoom. It should just be at the bottom panel. You can raise your hand, and when the moment is right, I will call on you. Otherwise, if you're feeling a bit shy this morning or feeling like you haven't got enough coffee, just drop it in the chat thread, and I'll also be keeping an eye on that, and I can obviously ask your question on behalf of you to our panelists. We've also, so don't fret, you're not going to sit here for the next 2 hours. We've included plenty of space for you to go into breakout rooms. We're very actually quite thoughtfully, Astrid, thank you, to put people together that we think will be interesting combinations to discuss what's been shared this morning, to share your own insights and to learn from each other. So we've got about half an hour scheduled for that at about 8:05 this morning. But yeah, without sort of further ado, let's just roll straight into it and throw it over to Helen and Shaun, put you in the hot seat. So I guess I'll start off with Helen this morning. So Helen, what are you seeing at Les Mills relative to the Great Resignation?
Cool, thank you, Yvonne. Look, we are a purpose-led organisation, and it's not hard for us to be. Like we can hire people who are just fanatical about fitness, hire great mindset. So it's quite easy for us to build that purpose. And I think we've got offices in 9 countries, about 650 people. We've seen attrition globally increase to about 19%. So it's not massive. And I can talk a little bit about why that is. But the area, probably unsurprisingly, that we've seen most is in that tech and digital space, which, as Ed pointed out earlier, that's, we had this sort of, I call it a teenager, which is our online platform. We've been growing for the last 6 years. Beginning of COVID just took off, and suddenly our business that's been going since the 60s, it was suddenly 45% of our revenue. So massive. Wow. And so that's been, we're suddenly now playing with these big players, the Apples, the Pelotons, etc., globally, who've got budgets that we could never compete with. But our digital and tech teams are, central to this. This is where we're going to get our growth from. So we've got about 120 people in New Zealand in this, and we've seen about 30% attrition. Obviously, that's supply and demand. We've seen a lot of going to young tech companies, willing to pay up to 30% more. We're having to probably pay about 10 to 20% more for the same talent. And our borders open soon, which is really exciting, but it's going to be hard to get visas. I've seen Aussie is starting to fish really heavily here. So I'm not seeing that we're going to see great change soon. But what was really interesting is that our digital and tech teams, they self-report that what's important to them is working on really cool stuff, career progression and money. And what I've seen missing in this group, as opposed to our other employee groups, is their connection to purpose. And I think we've created that because it's such a small, it's such a hard to fill area, that rather than focusing on, their connection to fitness, connection to purpose first, we've had to just purely get those that can do the job. So it's technical skills with a little bit of EQ. So I think that's where we've been hardest hit.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. And we'll kind of explore that a little bit later, but I want to hand it over to Shaun. And yeah, maybe if you can share a little bit about what's happening at Chorus at the moment and what you've seen relative to the Great Resignation.
Tēnā koe, Yvonne, kia ora koutou katoa, atamarie to the Chorus whānau on the call this morning. I, in preparation for this, actually went to the font of all knowledge, Google, because I thought this is something just kind of interesting to understand the global context here, Edwin. I think we spoke to it. And the Great Resignation's got many guises. It's got the Great Attraction, it's got the Great Jobs Boom, it's got the Great Reshuffle, it's got the Great Rethink, it's got the Great Adaption. there's many greats that are now being used in trying to describe the kind of current global context. And that says to me that everyone's different. I mean, Helen's spoken to her context and differences, and I think we've got a slight different nuance to what we're seeing. And I think that's part of the big opportunity and a little bit of the challenges. We may see resignation or we may see opportunity, but we've got to put it in all of our contexts. So that's kind of the first ask I'd have of everyone. The alarm bell for me when we started to look at it, I'll get to our numbers in a moment, but the alarm bell for me when you look at some of the global research is that 36% of people that quit in the past 6 months didn't have something else to go to. And that's new and different, right? We've been through recessions before, we've been through bounce backs before, we've been through resignations before, but 36% of people are quitting because they don't have somewhere else to go to. That worries me, and that indicates to me that it's been bloody hard for the past 18 months. And I think as kind of HR professionals, we now have the responsibility to really get under that bonnet to truly understand what's happening in each of our organisations, both at the part of leaving, but then also at the part of keeping and kind of retention. So we've been trying to get under our data to try and really truly understand why people are going and why people should stay here at Chorus. I don't have a whole heap of insight, but I think that I'd start by just going at an inference level. I think everyone in our organisation is tired. We are at a unique inflection point strategically. So we built a fibre network that's kept the country connected. You know, we're super proud of the fact that when New Zealanders weren't able to learn, they could do that from their homes via good, fast, stable internet. When New Zealanders weren't able to go to offices, they were able to continue to work from their homes. When New Zealanders weren't able to connect, way back 2 years ago, when we were in the novelty of cleaning everything up because of lockdown and doing all those jobs that we never attended to, we could still connect to our friends and whānau across the world. So we're super proud of that. But as we kind of finish that build, we're also now trying to figure out what do we stand for. And so I think employees, if I net that up, and Helen spoke to it, and they've got a strong purpose, I think employees want to have a renewed and revised kind of sense of purpose in their work, purpose in their routine. They want to have a bit of social and interpersonal connection with their colleagues and their managers. I think they want to have a sense of shared identity. And this is in addition to pay and benefits. But I think they want now a bit more meaningful work and interactions. And I think as leaders, what we can provide them is empathy.
Oh.
So that's my kind of inference. And I've got our data because we have got some hotspots. But that's what I think is kind of going on at macro.
Yeah, so Helen, just throwing it to you. I can see you've unmuted, so you've got something to add. I was just wondering, so you talked a little bit about digital and tech really being your pain point because Les Mills' purpose is so strong. But I was wondering, were there sort of really clear patterns within the digital and tech space for you, within that cohort?
I mean, they're demographically, we've got a fairly similar group.
Sure.
So look, I think the main thing for me around the tech group is that purpose piece. And we're not necessarily known as being, as having the cool stuff. So from an EVP perspective, we really do need to work hard to get that message out. I think when I'm talking to Shaun's point about, the meaning, the purpose and meaning, people have had time over COVID to reflect and they've gone, I'm just not willing to put up with not having that purpose and meaning in my work. But I think the other point, career development is really important, and money is just sort of the thing you need to take off the table. But again, that's been quite hard to navigate. But I think the main thing for me really is the day-to-day work that you're doing, your whole system of work. So the technology that you use, the way you're set up from silos, where the decision-making is made, your autonomy, all those sorts of things that actually in your day-to-day work make your life pleasurable or painful, that is fundamentally so critical because it's linked to burnout as well. So we have a lot of burnout. People are coming out of that now, but really we've got to be able to create that environment. So for our digital and tech team, for example, they want to have really good platforms. They want to have really good tech. And if they haven't, they're prepared to walk. So a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment is really focusing around getting those, the day-to-day work right. And the work we're doing with Radically, hence this group, is around adaptive ways of working, that autonomy piece. That's so important for all our employees, but that digital tech space, they are demanding it. And most of our digital teams wouldn't walk into a world that's not agile. Like, they just wouldn't. It's, you know.
And so that's quite interesting in terms of a bit of, you know, that retention strategy as well. Shaun, I'm curious, and I know this is like a total setup, by the way, for full transparency, because we had a bit of a yarn before the call, but I'm really interested to look under the hood a little bit with some of that data, because you noticed a pattern in terms of the people leaving Chorus, didn't you?
Yeah, and it's picked up on this burnout thread that Helen mentioned. So we track our attrition rate, voluntary turnover. March last year was 5%. March this year it's 15%. So at a kind of annualized level, we are seeing people leave Chorus more so than ever before. So you kind of go, oh yeah, so we're seeing some sort of great attrition happening at Chorus. Unpick that a bit more. We started to segment it just through the gender lens and just through seniority lens. And we use an EY career level framework. So think, I'll give you some numbers. Career level 8 to 11, think senior roles at Chorus. Career level 3 to 7, kind of think mid-management junior roles. I'll use that label actually. Our senior female role annualized turnover is 26%.
Wow.
Right, so 11% higher than the actual Chorus rate. Our female kind of mid-tier junior role is 20%, versus the males are at junior roles, mid-tier 12%, and senior males at 6.8%. So we actually go, well, Houston, we've got a problem here. Why are we seeing all our kind of females disproportionately leave, in some instances at some points of time at a 5-to-1 level, at a kind of gender identification standpoint, out the door? And like all good HR functions, they tick a box and they give us some insight. So 50% of that is career progression, 37.5% of that is for family or personal reasons, and 12.5% is pay or benefits. And you go, whoa, that's interesting. And then along came COVID, and COVID kind of exposed stuff that most knew all the time. And that is, and I'm going to go to some stats because this really blew my mind in a McKinsey report, which is this report around the impact burnout is having on females relative to males thanks to a global pandemic. But 1 in 3 women, or 60% of mothers with young children, spend 5 or more hours a day on housework and caregiving. So if you net that up, 5 hours a day is at least another half-time job. And so the global pandemic kind of stripped bare and brought to the surface what a whole heap of people already knew, but a whole heap of people didn't know and didn't want to talk about in corporates around the world, which is the imbalance of responsibilities outside the workplace. And now we're kind of going, well, what's our responsibility as a corporate in that context? And what does that mean, especially for prolonged working at home pieces? Because we are seeing something that's not right. So another thing we're doing now is we're actually outsourcing all our exit interviews. Right. Because the country's too small, right? Like the 2 degrees of separation here, Katrina and Helen evidence that as a case in point. People exiting Chorus are not going to tell the HR team why they're truly leaving. Because they're worried, or they could be concerned that might impact them later in life. So let's actually outsource that and get under that bonnet. And we're going to start to get some, I think, really interesting data, because I think there's something more back to what is it all really about? There's something happening in the culture and the wider ecosystem that's also playing a role relative to those stats that I told you about burnout, which are alarming, and, you know, and I'm married with 2 kids, and you know, I have to put my hand up and say, I think I do a good job, but I could do more. Mm-hmm. And that's not right.
And I think as well that the real pain was when you didn't have childcare in schools. I mean, that was just, it was like this tsunami that came down on parents. But like you say, Shaun, from the people in our business, it did sit more with our women than with our men, and that has been really tough. And your point around exit interviews, and actually there's a lot of data that I've looked at online and I don't agree with. And when you look at how they've done it, people report different things, not even if they feel that they're going to be judged, but it's just when you're thinking about why you're moving or why you're leaving, often things will pop into your mind like REM, but actually on a day-to-day basis, they're not the fundamental reasons you're leaving. So a lot of the data that I'm seeing out there, you do have to take with a pinch of salt and go, actually, why people are leaving. But definitely, I think there's more that we can do with women. And one of the things that we're trying to do is bring people back into the workplace. So we're brainstorming at the moment, we will never push people in, but we want to bring them in because they go, this is amazing. So, on-site childcare, things that can actually really help create greater equality for people, and give them connection for both parents. I think we've just got to get more creative around how we're supporting our people.
Yeah, and I think busting a few myths. So we've just done an independent cultural audit, because whilst I've been citing everything associated to kind of the gender lens, it's actually all a part of the greater inclusion challenge, right? And one of the things that blew my mind when we got played, so when you see something, you can't unsee it, was this notion of, and I had never thought about it, was this thing called the first shift, the second shift, the third shift, and the fourth shift, is we ought to try and drive balance in our organizations through a gender lens. And that kind of first shift being females doing their job, second shift, what happens outside of work, third shift, you're also high potential talent. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a mentor and we'll give you a coach. And while you're at it, we'll put in an extra 45 hours worth of training, because we want you to kind of grow and develop. The poor person has not been able to do their job because of this first, second, third, fourth shift aspect. And that kind of blew my mind around intentions, but then impact, when we got it played back in terms of the focus. So we've had to raise it up out of kind of gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, and go, actually, what does this mean at an inclusion level in totality? Because if we try and solve that, the rest will follow.
And I think at a really holistic level, like what is that employee experience really like? Because all of a sudden, everything that you've sort of said, Shaun, with the best intention just becomes noise. And I think over COVID lockdown, when you've had that time to, everybody was just sort of in their little box for, 40 hours a week and then some, right? Especially during level 4, the spotlight just then becomes, there is no difference between work and life. It's just life. So how do we, I guess, as workplaces, cater for that shift in mindset, which I think that is, the outcome of it is people resigning. But, I'm really curious to find out what sort of interesting recruitment strategies, that you may have been trying. And I know you've started talking about some strategic and tactical changes that you're making in terms of exploring on-site childcare. But how has this really changed, how you're approaching recruitment and retention at Les Mills, Helen?
Great question. So from a recruitment perspective, we've had to invest in technical recruiters, to be able to give the opportunity to proactively source. Most recruiters just don't have the time. We've created a global talent director role, and really it's about leveraging our people. So the biggest uplift we've seen from a recruitment perspective is getting our people onto LinkedIn, getting their profiles really well, giving them the messages, handing them the stuff that we're doing internally for them to share on social media. We've seen a big uplift through that. It's been a hard work, but really good. I think there's from a recruitment perspective, that's one side. I think from a retention perspective, for me, creating the best place in the world to work, that's what we all want to, that's why we're here, that's what we want to do. But really being focused around that our retention strategy is, the whole damn pink, the mastery, purpose, the autonomy. And You know, for us, from a purpose perspective, for example, you know, we're growing massively, and you're very at risk of talking about the numbers all the time. And I've seen it in our exec team, and we're, you know, focused on the numbers, and it comes through in our communication. Is taking a step back and going, we've got to go back to our roots. We're a fitness organization, so there's a lot of stuff that we're doing around, you know, we sweat together, we talk about that, so we do group workouts together. You know, there's a lot of, you know, we fly people, we take what we call our sort of difference makers, and we take them away to live events. There's a lot of stuff that we do around purpose that is really important. Our purpose is for a fitter planet, so, you know, there's all stuff around ESG. We're looking at getting B Corp certification. You know, we plant hundreds of thousands of trees every year. That's not news, but it's what our people want. But we are, you know, from a purpose perspective, that's really important. And then when you look from a mastery perspective, the career development is just so important for people. People want to know that they're growing. And so, you know, we're putting in a career pathway framework, similar to the contribution model that Spark and others have rolled out. It's actually going down really well. You know, we've got a lot of, we do development work, but really our people drive that. We're then doing a lot around, that autonomy space. So like I say, we're working with Radically at the moment to look at building an adaptive organization. It's the number one thing. You know, our organization is siloed. You know, there's friction, there's analysis paralysis, the whole decision making at the top, endless meetings. So that's that. When you talk about employee experience and what will attract employees and retain employees, we've got to get that right. And I was saying beforehand that, you know, all our competitors can copy our products. It just takes money. But your culture is your biggest strategic advantage, because it's really hard to copy. And so that, for us, that's where we're putting all our efforts right now. And Shaun can talk to this. I mean, Shaun's doing a whole transformation journey. I went to Shaun to go and get all his knowledge and information. But for me, when I look at retention strategies, it is about creating an amazing place to work.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I feel like when you were talking, there was that MasterCard line in my head that, you know, it's priceless. Like that sort of purpose. You can't put, I think, a dollar value on that when people want to work for you. That's what keeps them. And then obviously, you know, my husband, actually, he's also going through a hiring process at the moment, and it's just kind of come sort of so clearly to me that if you kind of can't nail your purpose, and if people don't feel like they're really valued at work and they understand the why of their work, they're going to leave, because there are 100 other jobs out there and everybody is struggling to retain people. Shaun, I'm really curious to find out your strategies and sort of what you're doing at Chorus at the moment.
Well, I'll just reiterate the power of the purpose. So it goes back to the story I said earlier. So we've just commissioned a piece of work where someone's come in and done a whole heap of interviews across the organization to try and help us articulate what's actually happening in the ecosystem of Chorus. How does it work as an integrated pieces of parts to try and give us some sort of cultural diagnostic? And what was a kind of striking piece of insight is this notion of the power of purpose. So our purpose is to make New Zealand better. And our purpose, as I said, is we're proud as an organisation of the impact we've had on the country, especially through the global pandemic. But when you actually unpick our real purpose, the stuff that's below the line, where the power really lies, where the decisions actually get made, where everything really happens, it's been build the network on time, under budget, and as efficiently as we possibly can. And whilst we've had Make New Zealand Better as the headline, underneath it, it's been build the network. And that's been really fascinating that the organisation has figured it out by virtue of the way in which the ecosystem works. We've now built the network. So now why do we exist? So we're very lucky that we're at a massive strategic inflection to be able to unpick what that means for us. What does that mean for Chorus? And we're kicking off quite a big piece of work with the organisation to understand from all stakeholders, why do we exist, so that we can reorientate the strategy and then reorientate the culture around that. So we're lucky that we've got that ability ahead to forward. We've got that opportune moment for us, but don't underestimate the power of purpose, because the organisation will figure it out, and then they may also vote with their feet if they don't like how that power dynamic shows up in the context of culture.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm just going to call on Ed because he's got a really interesting bit of insight about purpose. And I think, yeah, Ed, if you want to sort of share your little piece.
Yeah, cool. I mean, my own curiosity has been sort of leading me to try and do research on my side too. And I discovered this report, which is one of the most ambitious long-term research projects done on organizational effectiveness and behavior. And it's a very, very interesting piece of work. It's called the How Report, H-O-W, and I'll flick through a link in the chat shortly. What they found, that the researchers structured the organizations into 3 groups. The first, and the language is a little bit strong, so bear with me. The first group they called blind obedience, where they had what was called a dominator hierarchy, very task-driven, power-based. The boss says you do or you're fired. It's kind of, you're expected to be obedient. That's the culture that creates. The second group they called informed acquiescence, which what they mean is that the description is it's process-driven and rules-based. So it's still based on a dominator hierarchy, but they've kind of softened it a little bit with, a little bit of modern management techniques, some agile stuff, but it's still kind of very, very top-down. And then the third group they called self-governed, and that is the organizations that are purpose-inspired, values-based. The people in those groups have freedom from a lot of bureaucracy, micromanagement, and as Helen was saying, they have autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And the data coming out of it is actually really, really interesting. On every single business front, the self-governed organizations on every business metric are winning. They're winning at attrition, they're winning at market share, employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, revenue growth. And only 36% of the blind obedience companies were classified as high performing, whereas 97 of the self-governing were. And it's quite interesting, the findings of the report. In terms of timing for today, it was perfect. That essentially a lot of these self-governing firms, these more fluid and open firms, are actually disrupting traditional sources of talent and stealing them. And I think, Helen, you opened by saying some of the small, cool little tech startups are able to target your people, and Australia is potentially targeting people. So I think there's an interesting segue there. To me, the more that we invest in organizations that give people this opportunity to live out purpose, that give people the opportunity to have some autonomy and participate in the future of the organization, I think that's actually the real opportunity here.
That's so interesting because we've got 9 countries. So we basically create all our content in New Zealand, and then we sort of throw it over to our 9 countries, who then disperse it out to 110 countries. And so they're essentially sales and marketing with finance, and they're a mirror of each other. But what we can see is the culture and the connection to purpose when each of these is different and is so highly correlated with retention and attraction of talent. In the US, we've probably got our worst culture, partly because you can fire people on the spot. We've got quite an autocratic leader in there, and we're working with him. So the culture in there, they've got our highest attrition rates of anybody. You then go to Sweden, who've already taken on a lot of adaptive, agile practices, who are much further along. They've got like 3%. So you're just seeing, I can see it, and I can spot the different cultures across you know, like IMEA, you know, we've got a team in Dubai who are, funnily enough, really really adaptive, and they've got an amazing team versus, you know, other areas. So we're definitely seeing exactly what you're saying, Edwin. You can just assess the level of adaptability, openness, purpose, and it's directly correlated to what you're seeing from performance and attraction retention.
I think that's super fascinating, Helen, because you kind of look at, especially as a global company, you've almost got little micro ecosystems, and you've got different political forces and economic forces that are all playing into that. And obviously with inflation shooting through the roof at the moment for everybody, that's another pressure point when it comes to people assessing their career, their livelihoods, where they're going to live. You know, I think more and more, you know, we used to think work and life, and we talk about work-life balance, or, you know, work and life being quite separated. But, and, you know, I think the last 2-3 years has just put a spotlight on, actually, they're just so intrinsically tied to each other. And you kind of, as an employer, can't think about it as two different things. People aren't just coming for you for 40 hours, right? They're coming for you for so much more than that. Shaun, I can see you nodding, so I'm just going to ask if you have sort of anything to add to this.
Yeah, look, I mean, most people on this call are here for a reason, because, you know, they understand the merits of organising selves differently, aligning around purpose, creating kind of guide rails for people to be successful and to be empowered to kind of deliver on outcomes in different ways. And certainly that's no different for us at Chorus. But I wouldn't underestimate how hard that is, guys. It's not simple.
Yeah.
When you try and disrupt a model of working that has been in a particular way for a whole period of time, and at the heart of it is a power dynamic that you're trying to disrupt. So rose-tinted glasses are great, but at the same time, it is complex, hard work, but we need to align to ourselves in an individual and a collective level that we know that it's the right outcome strategically for our organisation, for people that we work with. And I think that's the kind of, in addition, that I would add to all of this, because I've spent a lot of time with Edwin, with Dan. I can see Mikkel on the call, Marlena. You know, we've spent a lot of time at an exec level getting super clear around why would we embark on any sort of change to the way in which the cultural construct is working. And that was months of work to get us super crisp around why we should disrupt the very successful system that built the network and allowed us to have the freedoms that we were afforded through a global pandemic. So my only ask in addition is get really crisp and clear around your why, because that's why people will kind of follow, both at an exec and then at all organization level, in addition to kind of what it means around purpose and meaning.
And I think as well, just take stuff off the table that needs to be taken off the table, like REM. We gloss over it a little bit. It does matter. We've built a new total reward framework, and it's been looking at paying our people really fairly. We did a REM survey. We chatted to a lot of people. We've removed all our senior leader incentives, which has been very controversial, but it's about us going, you know, we can't be this top heavy anymore. We've got a bonus that is every year the same for everybody. And it's about saying we're going to remunerate everybody really fairly for the contribution they bring, but then we're going to reward people collectively. So I think just, you know, taking those things off the table is really important. They're just that additive that can't be, you know, adding to the issue while you're focusing on, like Shaun says, the really hard stuff.
Yeah. And you know, traditionally, when it comes to retention, REM has been such a core part of that conversation. But I think absolutely more and more, and this is something that we've reflected internally at Radically as well, you know, being paid fairly has meant that, you know, we just don't think about, you know, all the other noise. And then it kind of makes those conversations, I think it when I think about the organizations that I've worked with recently, it allows leaders to focus on what matters most to people rather than, getting tangled up in the weeds of REM. You are now really having very intentful, purpose-led conversations within the organization, and people want to be a part of that journey. And I think that's super cool. I think organizations are becoming more like just genuinely better places to work. You want to spend time with your colleagues. Once upon a time, I think about my dad's generation. You couldn't get out of work fast enough, and I'm not saying, to live at work is a great thing, but to have that sort of balance of feeling like you have a sense of belonging is so incredibly important. I really think this has been such a valuable discussion, and I'm really excited to see what comes out of those breakout rooms. So I'm going to suggest that we move into those breakout rooms and we have a discussion together. The purpose of the Adaptive Leadership Collective is for actually all of you to learn from each other and to share your pain points. And we're really, we'll talk about this a little later, but we're really hoping to do this next one in person later in the year. But it's really to kind of get this thought leadership going in smaller groups, and for you to really explore some solutions and to ideate together as well, and to talk about this topic, which is really top of mind for many organizations. So with all that being said, I am going to suggest that we move into breakout rooms. You'll have about 30 odd minutes in there, and I'd encourage you to explore the questions of, what patterns have you seen in your organization? You've heard about Les Mills, you've heard about Chorus. What have you done? And what, more importantly, what is working, but actually most importantly, what isn't working? And then we'll come back together. We'll have a very, very light share back, and we'll wrap up for the morning. So I'm going to suggest we do that and hand it over to one of my colleagues to just send you all into your breakout rooms to have a bit of a chat together. I'm going to hope that happens. Awesome. Thank you, team. We'll see you in about half an hour.
It's working. Yep.
Yay.
Yay. Okay.
This one hasn't been, you put the other one into a breakout room, not this one.
Oh, sorry, Cara.
I decided to climb that one.
Yeah, I will put you into just a moment, Cara.
All good.
So which one have you been into? I'll send
Cara's
you.
5, room 5.
Okay, I'll send you in room 5. Here we go. And Joe and Carl. Joe is going to room 3.
Yep.
And then Carl is going to 6, I think. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Great. We're still being recorded.
Cara Smith.
Cara messaged me, and she had signed in twice, and there's something wrong with her devices.
Yeah.
So she did private message me, and then I sent it into Slack being like, can someone not add Cara? And then obviously we added the wrong Cara, so it's all been sorted in the last 30 seconds.
I can remove this one here, can't I?
Yes, you can. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Oh, Carl, you're still there?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Cool.
The recording's still going, so I wonder if we can just pause that while they're in breakout rooms. Otherwise, whoever's watching is back.
Then otherwise it's going forever. Just a moment. Where's the recording? Pause. Stop. Or there we go.
To see people slowly drifting their way back into the main space, which is good.
Yeah, some people are waiting out the clock, the 30-second countdown. Others hit the button, right?
And then you get sucked back out of the, it's like getting sucked out of a black hole.
Yeah, they'll be the mid-sentence people. And the most important thing is,
yeah. Oh man, Zoom cut me off when I was saying something really important. Yeah, okay, I think everybody's back now. All right, welcome back, everybody. Really hope that you had some nice, rich discussions in your room about the Great Resignation. We're just going to do a very, very quick round of sharebacks. We've got about 13 minutes before we're going to let you go and start your days. So I'm going to just ask, perhaps, I'm going to call on room by room, I think, to share back, one person to share back the most interesting thing that you talked about. So let's start with room 6.
All right, that was us. So some interesting stuff that we talked about, obviously, was talking about purpose and line of sight between the work that we do and the people that benefit from it. But there were some interesting things around there being kind of a point at 2 years where if you treat a person well, that they end up staying for a long time, or they start to look elsewhere. I thought that that was kind of a pretty interesting data point there. And when we got into talking more about what we're doing about it, one interesting comment was about setting up mentorships to put somebody in a place of kind of a big brother or big sister position to where they feel a little bit more ownership, not only for a person and helping bring them up, but also for the work culture. You know, they get to contribute to that by helping another person grow. I thought that that was a pretty interesting point as well.
Super interesting idea. Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Room 5. Room 5?
Sorry, I didn't realize was that our room.
I have no idea what my room
Oh,
number
sorry. I'm sorry. Room 5 had Hannah and Cara and Isel, Michal, and Susan Reid.
That's us. Cool.
Yes.
Okay, really, really interesting discussion, and a few themes that came about. One was around, you know, it's a shame it's taken the pandemic to change the way that we think in regards to leadership, but, you know, we need to learn from it. You know, like we've managed to bring in all these flexible ways of working, and we need to continue on challenging the way that we work and deliver to our people, and you leverage from that. There's a lot of emerging sort of purposes right now. Everyone's come together at the beginning of the pandemic and they've collaborated really well together and had that sense of purpose. But now it feels like that's evolving for probably a number of organisations, and it's time to reconnect to purpose and work together to work out what this new purpose is, and how to generate that amongst the people. And that, you know, the culture, leadership and environment, they can be quite different across countries and regions and organisations, you know, and how do we leverage off the ones that are creating the self-governing environments more effectively? You know, how do we replicate the good ones, really? And these areas are really important moving forward. So some great discussions and some great ideas, thank you, team, of how you've been responding more flexibly and what we could be doing too. So thank you.
Awesome. And I guess, you know, just, you know, encouraging you all to use this forum and use the connections that you're making at ALC to keep those conversations going, whether that's over coffee or on a more informal basis as well. Yeah, to learn from each other, because that's what this community is all about. Great. Thank you, Susan. I am going to ask room 4, which is Anna, Bill, Ellie, Gina, and Patrina.
Oh, cool. That's us. Thanks, Yvonne.
No worries.
We had a really great discussion about the purpose and Great Resignation, also known as Great Reassessment. And I'll start with the purpose. Probably what we've talked about a lot is how important it is to really interlink purpose through all the processes and all the connections that you build with your employees in the company. It's basically the exercise of stakeholder mapping, see where those links are, and build purpose in those conversations, in those interactions with your people, and to always stay on top of that. And the other thing that we talked about is the Great Resignation itself. I tend to look at it as a great reassessment, and I think it's an opportunity for everyone as an individual and for every business, for every company, to look at the Great Reassessment as not necessarily people leaving the business, but it's how you can make it work for them, for their current choices, lifestyle, and aspirations and dreams within the same business. So it's helped them reassess their position, reconnect, with the company and the purpose they're already working for and make the most out of it.
Yeah, I love that. The opportunity to reassess that reconnect, the ability to allow your current employees to reconnect and explore what that means. And I really love the stakeholder mapping idea as well that you came up with. So yeah, really nice job, Room 4. Thank you so much, Anna. Yeah.
Cheers, Yvonne.
Thank you. All right, so going to very predictable pattern that I've got going on here, but Room 3, which was Brendan, Greg, Joe, Susan, and Van, gonna go with. Yeah, who would like to share back from Room 3?
I will. Hello, everybody. It's Susan here from AT. So we were really talking, the theme of what we talked about is a lot of it, but the theme is really about connection, making, and that comes back, I think, on the comments that Shaun made earlier today. And we really want to thinking that role modeling this at the senior level, starting with our leaders, checking in on people, and that checking in and making that checking in real, really, really powerful, and letting people talk, taking the time to check in, taking a pause. And I put forward that, you know, I would create a role for me if I could, as chief connector officer, or chief fun happiness connector officer. I think there's a role for someone, I'm just going to create it, that actually makes sure that that's bubbling throughout the organisation and doesn't go away, that human collaboration spaces are there for people, that things are welcoming. At AT, we're beginning to look at completely redesigning the spaces we do have for people to connect together, and how inclusive and welcoming those are. And we also talked a bit about, you know, movement within organisations, and it seems like, and especially for AT again, what we're seeing is we're getting a lot of internal movement, and that's actually one of the hooks of creating a good career path for people, hearing what they want to do, and giving people a zigzag, what I call zigzag opportunities, things they didn't expect they could do. And I guess at AT we're big enough to have that breadth, and I'm sure other large organisations on the call have also got that breadth and opportunity to give people a career they didn't expect. I think it was at Chorus, they're having job of the week and promoting one internal job of the week and making a big zany kind of effort around that. I love that. I'm going to take that back for sure. I think we should be doing that. I don't think we're making enough fuss, and our internal communications certainly need an injection. So that's my bit.
Thank you so much, Susan. The Chief Fun Officer, I think everyone's just, I mean, looking at the chat thread, everyone's leapt on that one. So I guess it's the race to the first CFO, the new CFO, to this group, which is awesome. And I love also the idea of, you know, especially with bigger organizations, the zigzag movement as well, and sort of the shifts around the organization to create those new opportunities for people. Yeah, and the job of the week, how cool. Chorus, right? You said, has that one going?
I think it was them. They can speak to it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. It really is. Amazing idea, team. All right, thank you so much. I am going to call on room, oh my gosh, where did I get up to? Am I up to room 2? Room 2, Abby, Helen, Priya and Suj.
Suj voluntold me to play back, even though I can't remember my own name today, and I didn't take any notes either, so I just engaged in the conversation. So the team's going to play back if I miss a few key items, but essentially I'm pretty confident we didn't stay to task for the Great Resignation, but we had an awesome chat about connections and belonging, and how that's a key part of the retention, and that resetting the new normal and ways of working, and why in person being more intentful and meaningful about when you connect and when you come together in person. There was a cool mention of an experiment around helping people who are remote dine into sessions of people in the office and giving them a role to play and facilitate and lead the conversations, that they feel like they're part of it and they're not just watching a room get all excited together. We also talked a little bit around brand and EVP. I couldn't remember that acronym, but Helen fixed that for me. And how at Becca, some of our differentiators for employee brand and attraction was flexi working, and remote and hours and stuff. And that's all now gone. That's leveled, right? And so you have to kind of relook at what are some of the things that we can do to make ourselves more attractive as an employer.
Awesome. Thanks, Evie. I really love the idea of connection, belonging, and resetting. I thought it was really interesting watching sort of the pendulum shift. And, you know, if you're on LinkedIn as well, you'll see those polls pop up of like, you know, 100, oh gosh, like, you know, heart react if 100% in person or 100% remote or 50-50 or like 2 days in, 2 days out, 3 days out. And I think there's no right answer. You know, the pendulum was so like for a really long time was, you know, presenteeism, like make sure you're seen in the office. That's how people know you're here and engage. And then obviously with the pandemic, we swung quite the other way in terms of, oh, actually I can be productive from home. Well, what is this? But then somewhere along the way, we got a bit muddled, right? And it was like, oh, I'm actually really not that productive at home anymore because there's kids and laundry and all that sort of stuff. And we're sort of finding that nice little balance of that respect and that mutual respect between employer and employee, which I think is quite nice. And I think every organization is, you know, re-looking at that definition and what that means. So yeah, really cool. And then thanks, Abby. So finally, I'm going to call on room 1, which was Anne, Celena, Ed, Marlena, and Shaun.
Kia ora. Celena also got voluntold, but kind of volunteered, so it's all good. Really interesting. We all talked about purpose, that being a shared challenge for us all to connect people to that, and quite a similar experience across the businesses. Both balancing retention of existing people and recruitment. So getting Chris on the voice, you know, what kind of employer we are in our advertising and things like that. And we had an interesting discussion about the challenge and the tech roles. Ed posed, why wouldn't you, if you were a store person, go and retrain in the IT space? The going is good and the money is flowing. And we just talked about actually where we're competing as businesses tends to be in that senior level, you know, fully qualified. And so that's the crunch more than the grad. But, you know, the how might we build career paths and advertise roles that aren't necessarily at that level and then grow people within. So yeah, good conversation. I'm going to steal a couple of those ideas too that came through in the playback. So thank you.
Yeah, I think everybody's going to be in the race to the first appointment of CFO, I think, which is pretty cool. But yeah, no, super interesting around really examining the career pathways and, you know, why not retrain people into those high demand roles and provide them with the, you know, technicals, qualifications, etc. Really good discussion, team, and super on time, which I'm stoked about as your facilitator. So we were due to wrap up at 8:50, and hey, look, I just want to thank you so much again to our speakers, Shaun and Helen. We really appreciate the time and effort in sharing your experiences with each other, with all of us and with the wider business community. So cool to hear that people are stealing ideas. That's the whole point of this community. And look, we're really looking forward to running the next ALC in person, which will probably be around late May and early June. We just want to connect with you all in person, and our speaker is due to be announced and our topic as well. So please keep an eye out for more details. Otherwise, just watch out for a follow-up email. I know Suj has been very busy doing his magic, so we can't wait to see the visual. No pressure, Suj. And we'll also send some references and useful resources that have popped up in the chat as well. Other than that, yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely Tuesday. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 See you later, everyone.